Cleveland Brown.
I've read the requests, I've heard the cries, and I feel your anguish. I'll stop teasing you guys now and finally review the Cleveland show already. Why cover this when I've hardly done any Family Guy coverage? Well, because this show is much shorter. I have a lot to say about Family Guy and its progression, but it would be a hassle to catch up to, and hard to put a verdict on as it's still running. Thankfully, the Cleveland show only ran for 4 seasons. That's a fine run in the grand scheme of animation, yet it's still considered a failure critically, if not commercially, and you have to wonder if they picked the wrong character to make a spin-off out of. But before we figure out why the Cleveland show came to exist, we have to learn who it's about, and I have just the YouTube series to help out with that. This is Cleveland Brown. He is a resident of Spooner Street and a good friend of Peter Griffin. Despite his laid-back personality, he's gotten into lots of troublesome misadventures over the years, sometimes with his friends and other times in his home. After divorcing from his longtime wife Loretta, he slowly grew tired of his life in Quahog and moved back to his hometown of Stool before returning due to low ratings. This is the early history of Cleveland Brown. Cleveland first appeared in the series premiere of Family Guy, Death Has a Shadow, in the scene where Meg touches the thermostat and all the neighborhood father's thermostat implants go off, although he's simply a background character until a more active speaking role in the 4th episode, Mind Over Murder, already setting up that Loretta wants more loving from him. From season 1 all the way up to 18, he was voiced by the white Mike Henry, a less controversial casting choice in the 90s than it would be today, but his nasally drawl quickly won the hearts of millions. Season 2 saw further developments to Cleveland's world and family, specifically Love Thy Trophy, which introduced his son Cleveland Brown Jr., and crystallized the gang of him, Peter, Glenn Quagmire, and Joe Swanson as the 4 drinking buddies. Seasons 2 and 3 were also where they started leaning more into what can most generously be described as jokes about racism involving Cleveland. He appears in the Million Man March, only for Peter, going through a feminine phase, to scold him and all the other men there. The day he meets Peter in a flashback, he's getting chased by ghosts, and is later the victim of an automated law enforcement system. Beyond these satirical jabs at racism directed at African Americans, Cleveland best became known for his stoic temperament and friendly demeanor. When the show was revived in 2005, Cleveland got an early spotlight shed on him in the season 4 episode, The Cleveland Loretta Quagmire, in which we learned that Loretta's been having an affair, secretly having sex with Quagmire, only for Peter and Brian to find out and tell Cleveland. After having his low-energy demeanor tested and getting back at Quagmire, he divorces from Loretta and lives on his own for the next 4 seasons. Loretta's voice actress, Alice Borstein, requested for her to be written out of the show, stating that she found the low, gravelly voice hard to maintain. The rest of season 4 was uneventful for Cleveland, just more guy activities, but 5, 6, and 7 picked up the slack. His most famous running gag, getting his house destroyed while bathing, began in Hell Comes to Quahog. He appears in the Star Wars specials, starting with Blue Harvest, playing the role of R2-D2, and his relationship with Loretta is explored again in the season 7 premiere, Love Blackshally. But a few episodes later in Baby Not On Board, he tells Cleveland he's getting his own spin-off show, leading to where we are today.
What an awkward time to get over my illness that makes me sound like a New Zealander. Thanks for having me on, Employee a Million. That should clear my Family Guy quota for the next 10 years.
No problem, TheRealJims. Now that you've been given a good idea of who Cleveland is, why was he given a spin-off? Well, the creators, Seth MacFarlane, Richard Appel, and Mike Henry, began devising it in 2007 while season 7 of Family Guy was being written. Mike had always been the one to pitch Cleveland's jokes and push for him to gain more relevance in the show, and was eventually convinced by Richard Appel that there was more to this character than could fit in Family Guy. Seth didn't have much involvement in the spin-off as a whole, only co-writing the pilot and voicing a few characters, providing support early on, then letting Mike and Richard create the show they want. He already had 2 to take care of. The MacFarlane cartoon unit was already getting quite hectic. His lack of creative input could be felt in various ways, but you'll soon see that has its perks. I mean, look at the seasons Family Guy was airing alongside the Cleveland show. They aren't a majestic sight. After having its pilot leaked online in the summer, the Cleveland show premiered on Fox on September 27, 2009, replacing Mike Judge's King of the Hill after 13 seasons. That went over well. Critical reception was mixed, but at least not all scathing. Some thought it had a little more heart than Family Guy, even if it wasn't making them laugh, and it seemed like a success story for a few years. But gradually, the ratings dipped, as more people realized this is just Family Guy but not as funny, causing it to be cancelled on May 20th, 2013 after producing 88 episodes. How can you call a show a complete failure if it got to that number? It takes a miracle for any cartoon to get past 65, or 10 these days, so it had to have been a hit with the Fox executives if no one else.
Good evening,
Who the hell are you?
Cleveland Brown.
Cleveland has fallen out of one bathtub too many and is tired of playing second fiddle to Peter. He wants to be the main character of his own life for once, so along with his dramatically redesigned son, he moves out of Quahog, Rhode Island, back to his hometown of Stool, Virginia, where he's quickly able to win over the love of his high school sweetheart, Donna Tubbs. It's a simple premise that promises that this show will have a little more love and passion in its stories than Family Guy, which isn't promising much, but you know what I mean. What are the denizens of Stool Bend like? Well, let's get the pre-established characters out of the way first. Cleveland was changed dramatically, going from the half-awake stoic type we've come to expect to a more eccentric persona, always trying to hone a new aspect to his identity. You can see the pressure of making a spin-off was getting to him. I'm not in favor of this new characterization. It makes him less distinct from Peter Griffin and feels like they're trying way too hard to keep him quirky, but you can at least say they breathe new life into him. Now, Junior got a very substantial makeover, looking and acting nothing like how he had on Family Guy before this. He's now a tween social outcast who's too sweet and innocent for his own good, unless the plot says otherwise. Still, he's probably my favorite character on the show. Donna is Cleveland's sorta loving second wife, and often the recipient to the weirdness of Cleveland's ventures. They give her a few activities like being on the local school board and playing the recorder, and do enough to make her smart and strong so she doesn't feel like a Lois clone. Her children from a former marriage include Roberta and Rollo. Roberta being a trendy teen with dreams of being a movie star, who's only given a few things to do that end up mattering, and Rollo, a 5-year-old troublemaker who thinks he's more of a grown-up than he really is. I had a black friend in primary school who loved Rollo, so he gets some kind of seal of approval. So that's the family, and Cleveland's new drinking buddies are a quirky bunch too. Lester is the token southerner hick, hanging on to guns and low-key racist remarks, but has a loving relationship with his obese wife, Kendra. Holt is the short single guy who may not be the most desperate bachelor in late 2000s Virginia, but pulls you in with very short successive sentences. His manner of speaking is more memorable to me than anything he ever said or did. And as you can see, there's even a bear. Tim, a missionary who basically does anything missionary-like. His wife Ariana gets more to do, with her and Donna forming a rivalry eventually. I even like the bartender more, Gus, voiced by David Lynch of all people. Fine casting, I guess, because while nice to his patrons, it always seems like there's something off about him. In Stool Bend, Cleveland works a job as a cable installer alongside his high school friend Terry, who's one of the bigger wastes on this show as they spend way more time on the drinking buddies. Like, when they reveal he's gay in season 2, it doesn't have as much impact as they want to deliver due to his lack of relevance. Their boss Lloyd has a crush on Terry, and that's all we really learn about him. The high school's principal Wally is a former classmate of Cleveland's with a whiny voice and just as pleasant personality. Gabriel is Roberta's faithful boyfriend who often tries too hard to appeal to her sensibilities. Coach McFall got this way through chewing tobacco, but is stern and gruff enough to leave an impact. And then there's Murray, a Jewish old man who Rollo befriends, and I mentioned his religion first because that's what most of his stories are about for some edgy reason. And lastly, in this big one-note cast, because apparently all animated sitcoms need these according to these writers, Cleveland's family. Cookie, his loving mother, Freight Train, his shut-off, disappointed father, Broderick, Cleveland's doctor brother who isn't a doctor here, Robert, Donna's ex if that counts as family, where predictable arguments between the men's parenting styles will commence, and Auntie Mama, the only maternal figure Donna had as a kid, a trans woman with a deep, real voice who farts loudly and always proclaims to be outrageous. Well, that left us on a bad note. The biggest gripe I have with the Cleveland show's supporting cast is that they really don't feel that different from Family Guy characters. They all feel similarly basic and gimmick-driven. A few felt appropriately regional for the new setting, like Lester and Tim, but most felt like rejected Family Guy characters.
It's his fault. He made me break my leg. And he ate my tater tots and my fish sticks, and he sat in my chair, and he called me the N-word.
Well, I'm allowed to, right?
This is a bigger debate now than it was in 2009, but it's an ironic feeling seeing a show about an African American family created and mostly written by white people, especially if they're going to lampoon a culture they weren't born into. When you watch a show developed by black creators like The Proud Family, The Boondocks, or even Fox's own The PJs, you can tell their creators have something to say and present through their unique artistic backgrounds. The Cleveland show can't do much with its leads beyond a few unoriginal media references and stereotypes, because this wouldn't be their story to tell. I shouldn't comment further because I'm also whiter than a mattress, but there goes a lot of authenticity right off the bat. There were a couple non-white writers, and most of the non-white characters have fitting voice actors, so it could have been worse, I suppose. As a spin-off to Family Guy, it borrows a couple of that show's hallmarks at first, like cutaway gags and elaborate parodies, but gradually phases the former out for another bank of humor: randomness. There's a lot of scenes in this show that don't offer anything comedic, but then end with a random joke because they just remembered they're a comedy series, and even then, a lot of the jokes fall flat because they have nothing to do with the stories. You're going to struggle to remember your favorite jokes from season 1 by the time you're watching season 4. They have so little staying power. But with the stories, I'll give them that they're better than most of what Family Guy's been cooking up for the past 15 years. The characters are given challenges to overcome that become recurring themes, so there's a sense of unity to all their plot lines. The Brown Tubbs kids especially have very reliable sources of stories, like Junior being a social outcast, Roberta trying to be independent, and Rollo going through some tough childhood dilemmas. And on the adult side of things, there's a teensy bit more heart than Family Guy. I know that's like saying an earthquake has more heart than a cyclone, but I'm still a bit impressed. I'm not very impressed by the animation though. If you've ever seen an HD Family Guy episode, you'd know. It functions, but it's very stiff, has flat character designs, and the movement's only good when it wants to be. It's even slower and flatter than the average Family Guy at first, but slowly picks up the pace. The nicest way of putting it is that it's ergonomic, but never really much more or less.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Someone should have told you not to with me.
When the Cleveland show began, there was very little separating it from Family Guy in terms of humor and storytelling, but season 1 gradually gets injected with more heart, really making you want to care about the denizens of Stool. It's a double-edged sword because the jokes and general atmosphere are still meant to be edgy, so it's constantly battling with itself, always occupying two mindsets. Take episode 17, Gone with the Wind for an example. The first act is all about Cleveland being put on a high-fiber diet that causes him to poot constantly, which somehow makes him and Donna popular at a karaoke contest. Then we find out Loretta was killed in a bathtub-related accident, causing Cleveland survivor's guilt. This is a pretty extreme example, but I hope it displays the absurdity that comes out of the show trying to have it both ways. To be fair, this has always been an issue with Family Guy. It's very rare they get a serious or heartwarming story right, so I guess the Cleveland show was thrust these curveballs more quickly. I guess the only big difference between season 1 and the rest is that Nia Long voices Roberta for the first 13 episodes before being replaced by Regan Gomez Preston.
You get on my nerves. Like when white people make a TV show they think black people will watch.
I'm a vapid teenager with no talents, no discernible personality, and no ambition other than to be famous.
But other than that, it's a pretty sloppy first season with tiny flashes of potential that aren't realized in season 2.
I was just on my way back from pulling a girl out of a well, and I heard what you said about me. I can't help but think that had a little something to do with the fact that you never could beat me on the court.
What?
It seems they're already trying to pull viewers back in, because this season kicks off with 2 big event episodes, one featuring the return of guest star... him, and a sort of out-of-universe parody of live shows. Within 2 episodes, you'll know what this season generally does well and poorly. If it's a more serious character relationship piece, don't bother. If it's super bouncy and referential, you'll get more fun out of it. Seriously, the more these stories try to take themselves seriously, the less I want to believe them, because they'll end up getting stupid anyway. That's why I can more easily get behind the episodes that are offbeat from the get-go, because they aren't setting themselves up for failure. This is easier for them to accomplish. Season 2 introduced us to Murray, the old man Rallo hangs out with. Rallo ribs on Murray for being Jewish, and Murray ribs on Rallo for being black. That's how they get along, actually. I'm not gonna say this couldn't be done today or anything, because this was pushing it for the time too. As for other random character additions, Terry was outed, but at least it doesn't affect his relationship with Cleveland, I think. I don't fully know, because the cable business is pushed way out of focus in the last 2 seasons, as was predictability.
No, 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 no!
Only 3 seasons in, and so soon it feels like they've run out of steam. It shows off how thin these characters were and that they don't feel like they can change and develop. At least Family Guy's style can change gradually, but the Cleveland show is thus far lacking in a clear, forward-thinking direction. The most we get is Choni, a Mexican mother who lives across the street who doesn't get along with Cleveland, yet again promoting diversity while relying on stereotypical jokes to make them funny. After Peter Griffin appears in the season premiere to once again give the ratings a temporary boost, it seemed like Seth MacFarlane just completely ran out of craps to give about this show, as he soon after stopped voicing Tim, handing the reins over to Jess Harnell.
The talking bear was so bad, Seth MacFarlane quit voicing him after season 2.
It's hard to make a talking bear funny.
It worked out okay in movie form.
It doesn't seem like Mike and Rich had given up though, so good on them for sticking to it, but season 3 was filled with phoned in and forgettable storylines. Hopefully things can improve for season 4.
Ah! I'm blind! Oh.
Holy cow, they did. They had to know this was their last chance, because this show's cancellation history is quite interesting. It was renewed for a 4th season before the 3rd even aired, but there was no news of a renewal or 5th season until April, when Fox denied rumors of a cancellation, before changing their minds a month later. Seriously, I love how dramatic this paragraph on Wikipedia's episode guide is, like this is some big controversy. No, the Cleveland show got cancelled. It's not the end of the world. At least it ended on a better note than you'd expect. The most improved character would honestly have to be Gus. They give him more surreal gags akin to his voice actor's work, like only now they were able to take advantage of that. Cleveland's doctor becomes a regular part of the gang after they reveal how lonely he is. Junior is revealed to be some kind of secret agent assassin, they turned into anime, they got Nicki Minaj, it's pandemonium! For how this show has garnered a reputation for being bland and unmemorable Family Guy table scraps, I'm pleasantly surprised that this final season did just enough weird crap to gain my interest. Whenever Family Guy or American Dad eventually end, they should take some notes from the Cleveland show, throw caution to the wind and leave the fans with something funny and cartoony. Season 4 may not have been enough to save the show in Seth's eyes though, as when Cleveland was brought back to Family Guy at the end of its 12th season, it was to crap all over his spin-off for a hot minute. And I can't say it was undeserved, because not much of this show is very good. I've managed to pick out 5 of the best examples for when things go right. Our gang is the old teaming up with troubled youth shebang, and getting them roped up in a seemingly innocent business that ends up being quite a bit sketchier than it seems. It's a stock enough plot for it to need this added edge. Whodunit is a legitimate mystery with Freight Train revealed to be a prolific whodunit writer. Odd concept and odd pair-up, but this show needed to get odd and fast. Cleveland Live is honestly a better take on the live broadcast special than the Simpsons attempt a couple years later. It kinda shows how thin the average Cleveland show plot is by constantly interrupting it with more interesting diversions, and I get a kick out of it. Escape from Goochland sees Stolben's rivalry with a neighboring Virginia town reach ghoulish levels in this Halloween special. The costumes are funny, and it briefly turns into a creepypasta near the end. And my favorite episode, Hot Cocoa Bang Bang, is one huge tribute/jab towards Comic-Con and similar conventions. The sorts of people who go there, how corporate they were getting around this time, and Robert Rodriguez getting a hold of some embarrassing film Donna starred in back in the day. This was the same year Spy Kids 4 released. This might be the lesser of two evils. There's a lot more bad episodes, more bad than anything else, but these are some of the only ones to genuinely annoy me. There Goes Our Neighborhood is the low point of Cleveland and Shawnee's tepid relationship. They're just as ignorant of each other's cultures it seems, so like, who am I supposed to be rooting for? Neither of them are the most authentic portrayal of their own cultures anyway. Here Comes the Bribe features some marriage counseling gone awry, as Cleveland ends up paying extra to secretly get the mediator on his side. We end up at prostitution. Bribes are bad, but there had to be a less scandalous plot progression available. The essence of Cleveland is another one that gets needlessly sexual. Cleveland meets up with a friend from high school that he was nice to, and I'll just show you the result and let you come to your own conclusion on how the show can handle the subject matter with a hint of sensitivity. Harder, Better, Faster, Browner reveals that Cleveland and Obama went to basketball camp together. But that doesn't matter as much as Kenny West bothering Cleveland before leaving him in the lurch again. I really do like this interview where Richard Appel says that Kenny's gonna be like their Sideshow Bob. How do we tell him? Flush of genius is when Junior finally loses respect for his father, when he bumps his head after using the John. It then becomes a toilet-based 127 hours-esque survival epic. This show really doesn't know what it wants to be sometimes. Dancing with the Stool seems like a fun idea at first. Put Donna and Junior together in a dancing competition, then they do something so forcefully edgy that it makes the dynamic unworkable for the rest of the show. Mama Drama is the one where we learn about the whereabouts of Donna's long missing mother. Sounds quite nice, but the really lousy Auntie Mama origin story and Cleveland's very manipulative way of revealing Dee Dee to Donna make this a frustrating skip. Cleveland's Angels has a fine second half, but will completely lose you with the setup that Cleveland is gambling Roberta's college fund. And remember, this show is still way nicer than Family Guy was at the time. Now that I think about it, Roberta's never really much of a meg after this point, so I guess they knew they might have gone too far here. Fat and Wet is a barrage of fat jokes disguised as a plot about Junior and Kendra wanting to be accepted despite their size. It's a really egregious waste, because there's a chance for commentary on obesity, but then they all go to Wisconsin and make as many fat jokes as they can. And finally, my least favorite Cleveland show episode would be a Brown Thanksgiving, for introducing Auntie Mama and more farts than I can stomach. What were they thinking with this character? Is she a parody of something? If so, it might be a half-effective one if they poured so much gassy anguish into it. So there's the Cleveland show. Even though it was eventually able to find its voice, and I cared a little more for the Brown Tubs than I do the Griffins now, there was always writing on the wall. It's quite ridiculous that Cleveland of all characters got a spin-off, where they had to dramatically alter his character so he could be a more generic animated sitcom protagonist. Quagmire was right to mockingly call him Joey, but still, his occasional badgering for a spin-off keeps him a total hypocrite. But beyond the characters, I found the show's core problem to be that it's constantly in its parent series' shadow. Whenever it tries to do something unique, it'll always fall back on the line-crossing and easy gags Family Guy would have done. That's a problem a lot of spin-offs run into. How do you keep the essence of the parent series while giving the audience something new with this world? All the Cleveland show gave was, what if Cleveland was the main character of Family Guy? And I'm not a big Family Guy fan after around season 6, so this is mostly disposable for me. I have seen that it's starting to get a bit more popular again, so more power to new fans finding out about it or finally checking it out, but I'm not rushing back to Stool Bend anytime soon.
It could be worse, though. At least we're not Detroit. We're not Detroit.
I tell you what, first guy that lets me out gets his own spinoff. Not you, Cleveland.